I don't remember learning that.
Ring a ding 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 ding. There we go.
Did you learn that?
All right, guys.
I'm pretty sure, but I've learned it before this year.
Now we are recording.
Yeah, I learned it before this year.
Why
It's
does
not- somebody keep going over quote so many times?
What?
Is it you? Look, somebody keeps going over it like a ton of times.
No, it's not me. I'm not that creative.
Isn't that, won't you get detention?
Yes, but it's usually the work study folks, so I don't know who it is. So.
Yeah.
Besides, that bothers me a lot less than some of the other inane BS that people like to do, like drama stuff. And actually, I wouldn't mind so much except that people like leave the marker stuff off my markers, they all dry out, or they break my
Chalk.
chalk, things like that.
Who would
So.
do that? What kind of a fool?
People,
What kind of
it just-
soulless monster?
It's,
should
it's not like
go-
they're murdering children. It's just I
We
only
should
have so
become
many
detectives.
markers, you know.
We should become detectives. That should be part of the world set, or yeah.
Yeah, you should.
All right, so let's talk about it. So Darwin, you guys know who that is, right?
Charles.
Charles Darwin. Yeah, she said it like, yeah, he's my friend.
Charles, right?
What's up, Charles? Oh, not much.
Charles invented the not the atom,
He did
the
not.
science. I don't know.
He did not invent the science. Although I just like how that was worded. So he proposed the theory of, what is that all about? What does that mean?
How things change over time.
That's an interesting summary, yeah. How things change over time. Do you guys know how that actually happens? Because that's something that people often say. It's like, we adapt, we change. Not really. That's not how evolution works. Because it implies that we're mutated, and that's not true. There's no X-Men. We're not like the hills have eyes. Easy, killer, easy. No, it's that. So basically, imagine this: everything in this world is trying to kill you. Basically, it's like playing Minecraft.
That's so
There's so many ways to go in this world. It's unbelievable. There's starvation. There's cold and exposure to the elements. There's dehydration. So basically, you are trying to not die by collecting resources and surviving. Makes sense?
Yes.
So it's Minecraft for you. But it's also real life. And here's the deal. Certain individuals are born just through random chance to have advantages over other people. So some might be stronger, might be faster, more resilient, healthy, all these types of things. And so they survive when the pressures of everything else kill those who don't. Because, they didn't survive. That's kind of ridiculous because they didn't survive. But anyways, so basically, what it is that it's basically about those that live on to pass on their genes, because it's all about reproduction. So, how this works. Let's take something like a giraffe. So, giraffes have long necks. Why? Well, basically, you can imagine that famine is a natural cycle of life. Cycles just happen. We don't experience it in the United States because, frankly, our technology has gotten so good, we can produce food even under famine-like circumstances. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So we don't wait for nature to take over. We let science do the work, so to speak. So we don't experience as much. But this is a common thing in many other less developed nations. It's common in the wild. So this means that giraffes that were born, if you can imagine giraffes, like horses with little tiny necks, if one had, a slightly longer neck, it would be able to reach plant matter, leaves, that ones with shorter necks could not. So when the famine strikes, they're able to survive while all the other ones die off. Yeah, they starve to death.
Right.
So they pass on their genes with other long-necked giraffes, so their children have longer necks. Right? So this cycle continues. And their necks keep getting longer and longer and longer until you get to a point where the necks are so long that the heart can't actually pump blood to the brain, they just die. They're just stillborn. So this is how it works. Over time, you have this process of the pressures of life that's referred to. Do the hands.
I think I got it.
Actually, you can get up. This is called survival of the fittest. You're working on that so far.
Yes.
Okay, another great example of this, guys, is dogs. Consider this. Dogs genetically are wolves. Yeah? More or less. But it's not exactly genetic wolf because they behave differently, yeah? I mean, let's face it. If you have a pet dog you've gotten from a breeder, you can expect certain behaviors that are better than if you've gone to the wild and get yourself a pet wolf. Pet wolf probably gonna bite your face off. Why is that? If they're essentially the same. It's because we have begun a process of socialization that is domestication. We breed animals that have the traits we want in them. Same thing with horse racing. In the case of dogs, we want dogs that are going to be good with people. They're not going to be skittish. They're not going to bite, all these sorts of things. So we take those animals and breed them together to create a new strain. This is genetic. It's not just training. Like, you can't just go get a pup wolf and raise it up. It's going to behave like, a golden retriever, because genetically it's different. Okay, that's evolution in progress. Great example of this. Have you guys ever heard of the Russian fox experiments? So during the Soviet era, there was a scientist whose name I don't remember, but basically what he wanted to do was to see, how does domestication work? Could he make it happen in an animal that had not been domesticated, and see how this works? So he took something that was close to an animal we had domesticated, foxes. Foxes are related to dogs. So he wanted to try to domesticate foxes. So he did the same thing, like I said, getting foxes that are less skittish and things like that, bringing them together. And many years later, after doing this, he did it. They're domesticated foxes. They behave very similar to what, like, a cat or a dog might behave like. Wagging the tail, things like that. However, the Soviet Union collapses. So what do we do with all these foxes? Start selling them as pets. So you too can have a pet fox. I will show you a video real quick of this behavior in action.
Oh my god, they told me this was really funny.
What?
YouTube. All right. Apologies to anybody who watches this later, because this is going to be kind of probably crazy, like sound loop, because it's going to be recording from the sound from the video. But if you listen really carefully, you'll be able to hear what the fox says. You're a cat.
Don't bite her. They're so cute. I want one.
They're low prices, $6,000.
Oh.
I want a wolf.
Oh.
this thing is actually kind of variable. They've got a behavior where they go very food like squirrels do. And so, like, people who own these types of things will say that, well, if I get the food buried in the couch, because, it's say, we'll go hang family. Who behaves? The kangaroo. Now, the thing I mentioned about this too, apparently there was a fox breeder in Indiana, but they have not bothered to domesticate the foxes. They have done crossbreeding, so they behave as wild animals, and people have gotten bit and things like that. They're much cheaper. It's actually wild. That is evolution. One day I put like,
She would.
I'm like the $6,000 a lot of domesticated pigs. I don't know, because the rush, it's real like a Maximilian.
Look at her eyes.
No, they're actually part of tied to breed. I don't think they are the breeder now of Jesus Thomas. I think they are tied to it. They're trying to show like what life is like in foxes. Because there are some that are questions like, go ahead and start widespread chipping these things. But then again, there are those who say, well, it's already technically population. There's plenty of dogs and things like that need one more.
Look at the little cub right there.
Oh, those are fennec foxes.
Oh,
No, but I'll show you what they look like. Ah, keep typing it wrong. These are actually.
Oh my god, it looks like a gremlin.
It kind of looks like a chihuahua.
That's so cute.
It kind of looks like a chihuahua.
Kind of.
look at the ears.
I don't really like fennec as much as the other kind, but if I had one of those, I'd name it Yoda.
Mm.
Anyway, so that's Darwinism. That's it in action. As you can imagine, though, this unites a big, not really a civil war per se, but definitely a big conflict amongst those who think that, because basically the explanation for the world before this was creationism, that God created everything. So the interpretation is that evolution is contradicting that. And in truth, it really isn't. But it does contradict literal interpretation. So what happens is there's a religious debacle that comes out of this. And Darwin originally didn't even want to post his findings because he was afraid of what people would say about it. He'd seen what happened before. But he did anyways because he was kind of encouraged to. And in the end, what he feared came true. People really lost their minds over this and was threatened and things like that. And, basically he had a hard time with it because he was a scientist. He wanted to experience and basically propose this theory of what he'd experienced with different animals and why they would adapt to their environments. And this made sense. So basically, if this applies to animals, what about human beings? So of course you have the theory that human beings evolved from apes or some similar genetic cousin. And so what we see here is that this is kind of one of the founding principles of modern genetics, an understanding of how life works. But also people started applying it to society, to sociology, which brings us to the concept of social Darwinism. Now, here's the thing with social Darwinism. Social Darwinism is an inherently racist worldview. Basically, what social Darwinism is an explanation as to why certain groups of people are more successful than others. And the explanation is it must be racial. You know, the same thing as Darwinism, it's just certain races are more adept than others. They're better than them. Now, this is a dangerous worldview. This is the same worldview that Nazi Germany held. You know, the German people needed more space. It was their right to take space because the other inferior races were holding them back. This is the same justification for slavery, for imperialism, for many of the evils of the modern world. It's because we're better than they are. So it's going to be used as an excuse of science to prove why we should take things over. Because let's be honest, you know, we're just saving the natives from themselves. You know, that sort of thing. Of course, it's an inherently racist worldview that has led to some of the greatest abuses of humankind by human beings in history. So this is where it comes from, if you're familiar with that. Another thing we start to see that kind of goes into this is psychology. Psychology is the study of behavior and of the mind. It's an explanation of why do we do the things we do. Because let's be honest, we as human beings frequently do things that are against what is in our best interest. You know, consider this. If we want to be perfect physical specimens, you know, we would be really like, I'm eating exactly this amount of food, you know, because I need this, and I'm going to exercise and do all this, and things like that, because that makes sense. That's, you know, you live longer, you'll be better health, everything's like, we don't. Why? You know? Because, you know, the easy answer is, well, because we're lazy. Yeah, but what does that mean? What is laziness? What's that?
So they on the couch doing nothing.
I suppose.
Don't want to work.
Weakness, sleep.
Weakness, sleep. Interesting. How about this as an answer? It's where you take pleasure from not working.
Yeah, that is like
That's
Yeah,
exactly it.
yeah.
That's my life story.
Well, the reason I say that is because studies have shown that being lazy activates parts of our pleasure centers. It's not just we don't want to do anything because, frankly, that's boring. A complete lack of stimulation bores us. We don't want to do that. Unless there's something else, physiological, sociological, that drives us to do so. What they found is there's this experiment where they took a mouse and they cut open its head and they put an electric sensor in its brain that activated when a button was pushed. And basically what it is, it triggered a pleasure response. You know, hey, this is nice. And they put it in a cage where it could either press this button and it would have a pleasure response, or go to this other button, press it, and we get a snack, right? The mice would start to starve to death because they wouldn't touch the food. They'd just the button over and over and over because it was easier. Mentally, what's going on whenever we procrastinate? We say, I'm going to do that tomorrow. I feel so good. I'm going to do that tomorrow. Because you're feeling the pleasure of having accomplished something, doing it tomorrow, without actually having to do it. So it becomes addictive. I'll do it tomorrow. Next day comes. I'll do it tomorrow. Next day comes. You know? And even when we actually eventually do it, we don't feel as good because we had to do the work, you see. So it's an addictive thing. The other thing I would caution is that laziness is really in the eye of the beholder. For instance, I hear old folks all the time, this generation of kids is so lazy. Well, first of all, let me tell you this. Every generation has said that. Since the beginning of time, kids are lazy these days. They've always been lazy. But I defy it a little bit considering your old schedule. You know, how much time do you really have each week to which you have no appointments, to which you have no responsibilities? I find when it gets to, and usually I bring this up in sociology, I can't talk to you guys specifically, but I find that it's not very much. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how much have you had just to sit there and do nothing? Where there's no like pressing on you, you need to do this.
Well, there is, but I just don't do it. On break, it depends.
Sundays, like, that's all I do.
No,
Yes.
we're not doing homework.
Yeah.
Sundays, like,
It's, I mean, maybe you do have some time, I'm not saying you don't have any, but it's, I mean,
There's always something to do.
yeah, I don't think it's as much, like, I was
Yeah,
much
there's always
busier as a teen than I was when I first got my first job. You know, I mean, I remember going from college to just working and being like, I get to go home, like, there's nowhere else to be. There's no homework, there's no school. Time I didn't have a kid, you know, I was married, but we frequently had to work opposite schedules because of where she worked, so I would go home where, you know, even, there were times that we didn't even have a pet, it was just me, in an apartment for like 8 hours.
How do you be like?
It's just like, I guess I'll play World of Warcraft. That's what I did. You know, and, you know, I have never had more free time since that point, you know. And wouldn't that really be much lazier?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, why do we have this fiction that children are lazy? Well, it's partially because, societally speaking, children have lesser responsibilities. You know, but that being said, you know, it's really a perpetuation. We always see them as being lazier than we are because they don't want to work. Who does?
no one.
To be honest. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are definitely those who are like, I enjoy working, but usually I find those people love their jobs. You know what I mean? It's the old expression, if you love what you do, you don't have to work a day of your life. I think to some extent that is true. You know, it doesn't mean that people don't get tired, don't get sick of it, they don't want to do it. But they usually do it anyways because they want what comes out of it, you know? Or what have you. Personal feelings, what have you. But this comes down to psychology. You know what I mean? And understanding these things help us understand ourselves and understand our reasons for doing things and help us to make better decisions. You know what I mean? That's the science of the mind. It's pretty cool stuff when you get into it. So we're going to see the beginning of this at this time period. The first psychologists who we're going to mention are Sigmund Freud and Ivan Pavlov. There are others, don't get me wrong, there's Carl Jung, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But, I would say that because like, I'm having bad, it's been a long time since I've done psychology, so I don't remember the names. Well, Karl Marx, technically. I guess you could say he's more of a sociologist, but kind of the same thing. But Pavlov was a scientist who studied learning, and specifically the physiological responses to mental stimuli. Because we can really change how we feel by what we think. I don't know if you guys have ever experienced, but you're reading a really intense book, like one that's just a page turn, your heart is racing, you gotta find out what happens next. That's a physical response from something mental. You know what I mean? Or if you've ever been depressed by the death of a character in a book or a movie or a TV show, you know, if you think about it, it's dumb because that person has never lived and never will. Yet you react to it strongly. Sorry? Oh, Gossip Girl. Fair enough. But a great example of this was the quintessential psychology experiment Pavlov did, where he took his dogs and he noticed that they would start drooling whenever he was getting ready to feed them just by like touching the door that had the food in it, you know, the cabinet. So he was wondering, how do they figure out? They can smell the food, things like that. I wonder if I can train them to have a physiological response to something that has no bearing on it. So what he did is he started ringing a bell right before he fed them. So the dogs knew bell rings, boom, it's time to eat, they start drooling. Okay? So one day he didn't feed them, just rang the bell. And he did again. And every time that he would ring that bell, they would start drooling. Until eventually they figured out, well, it doesn't need food anymore. But what we have here is classic conditioning. It's a classic form of learning. Another pretty funny example of this, actually, I had heard from my psych professor a number of years ago, and she was telling me that she had a really good kid, you know. I don't know if you guys have ever been to the store and the kid's like, my mom, I like the M&Ms! You know, screeching, you're just like, oh my God, you can shut up, you know. Well, her son never did that, not once. And she was so proud of him for not being that kid, you know, screaming things and want to. So she decided that she was going to get him a present. She was already at Toys R Us. She was buying something for her niece for her birthday party. And so she gets her son something. She's in the checkout, and, you know, she's just making small talk with the cashier. The cashier says, oh, it must be Tuesday. Yeah, it is Tuesday. What do you mean, must be Tuesday? Oh, you're in here every Tuesday. What do you mean? No, I'm not. I'm not here every Tuesday. I mean, I'm in here occasionally, not every Tuesday. Yeah, you're here every Tuesday. So he took, no, seriously, it goes through her checkbook, and sure enough, every single Tuesday, she's buying something for her son from Toys R Us. He had trained her to buy him a toy if he did not act up in public. And she is a psych professor. Like, this is what she says. I'm a psych professor. This is how it goes. It's behavior we don't even know we're doing, but we do it, you know. It's cool stuff. Freud had a little different views on things. I don't explain him very easily. I'll tell you that right now. You can look it up a little bit more to explain it. But basically, his thing was that we are all driven by kind of a war between our conscientious desires and our subconscious desires. So, for instance, we want to be socially acceptable and things like that, but on the other hand, we have desires to do things that aren't necessarily socially acceptable. For instance, you know, we might be driven to want to take something from somebody. We know that stealing is wrong, so we don't do it, but it's this kind of like thing going on in our heads, and that affects us, you know. So he was kind of studying from that perspective, and he came up with this idea, this theory of introspection, where you can find out stuff about people by having them identify things and show stuff in their subconscious. You might know the ink blot test, things like that, like what is this, you know, that'll let us tell you something about you. John Dalton, he came up with the idea of atomic theory, which is going to evolve into a lot of different places. We'll get to that in a minute. Charles Lyell, he came up with another idea that sort of went along with Darwin's in challenging the old view of the world by saying that, you know, the Earth isn't 500,000 years old, it's millions of years old. You know, so we're looking at different things. This is actually the first periodic table. It's invented or came up with by a scientist named Mendeleev, and again begins the classification of all the elements in the world. Origin of the Species is Darwin's work. This is a pretty famous political cartoon kind of mocking Darwin. It's like, you know, hey, saying we're monkey people, things like that. But this is something that goes on today. I think you guys caught the debate between Bill Nye and the representative of the Creation Museum, whoever his name is, I don't remember. But it shows that this is still two warring ideologies. And of course, you've got this, which is the work by Lyell that goes into how old the world is, showing tectonic movements in plates, what have you. And finish tomorrow. Just going to go through the slides on YouTube, so you guys can get them if you want to. You can pause it there, and that's it. Guys, have a good one.